The moment I stepped off the bus, the cold hit me like a slap. But that wasn't what made my hands tremble. I stood there in the snow, clutching the casserole dish like it was some kind of shield, watching happy families hug under glittering lights. Mine wasn't among them. I'd spent all night baking. The green bean casserole, the ham with honey glaze, my late husband's cranberry stuffing recipe, never wrote it down, but I'd memorized it like scripture. I packed each container carefully in foil and tucked them next to my clothes in the small floral suitcase, the same one I took on our last trip before everything changed. It wasn't about the food. Not really. It was about tradition. About not letting go. When I called Michael last week, he hesitated before speaking. I knew that sound. It was the sound of someone tiptoeing into a hurtful truth. "Mom," he said slowly, "I think we're just going to keep it small this year. Just us and the kids. Immediate family, you know." I didn't say anything right away. The silence stretched. He added quickly, "With COVID still floating around and the twins getting over that cold." "I understand," I said too quickly. "Of course. Immediate family. But I'm his mother." I changed his diapers. I taught him how to whistle and tie his shoes and pick out a Christmas tree that wasn't too dry. If that doesn't count as immediate, I don't know what does. I didn't tell him I'd already bought the train ticket. Now here I was, standing 3 blocks from his house, debating if I should turn around and head back to the station. I didn't. I walked. The snow was deeper than I expected, and my boots weren't made for real weather. But I kept going. My grip tightened on the pie tin every time I slipped a little. The houses all looked like they'd been plucked from holiday cards, glowing and cozy. I imagined Michael's living room. The tree, the fire, the twins playing with their new toys. I imagined my seat on the floral armchair in the corner, the one everyone forgot about until someone needed a charger. I rang the bell. Footsteps, muffled laughter. A child's voice yelling. Someone's at the door. Then, quiet. The door opened just a crack. Michael's wife, Julie, peeked through. Her face dropped when she saw me. "Oh, Ellen," she said, voice high. "You came?" I smiled tight. "I brought the ham." She opened the door wider, stepping aside. "It's just we weren't expecting Michael, didn't mention." I stepped in before she could finish. The warmth hit me instantly, along with the scent of cinnamon and pine. The twins ran through the hallway, giggling, wrapped in superhero capes. They didn't even look at me. I wanted to call out, to pull from my bag the gingerbread house I'd built just for them. I'd piped their initials on it in frosting. "Is Michael home?" I asked. Julie hesitated. "He's in the kitchen. Let me just..." But I didn't wait. I followed the scent of cloves and vanilla and turned the corner. He was standing at the stove, stirring something in a pot. When he saw me, he froze. "Mom," he said, surprised but not exactly happy. "What are you doing here?" "I told you I understood," I said gently, placing the pie on the counter. But that didn't mean I agreed. He sighed, not angrily, but heavily. He looked tired, older than last year. "We just wanted to keep things low-key. It's been a hard year." "I know." I touched his shoulder. "That's why I came." Julie entered behind me. "We don't have enough chairs." "I can stand," I said quickly. Michael exchanged a look with her. "It's not about that. It's just..." He rubbed the back of his neck. "I didn't want you to feel like you had to come." I didn't. I looked at the pot he was stirring. The gravy was too thin. I wanted to. For a moment, silence. Then he said, "You took the train?" I nodded. He looked down at the casserole, then at the pie, then at me. "You always make too much," he muttered, almost a smile. "Not if we eat it all," I replied, finally letting the smile come. The rest of the day didn't go perfectly. Julie was tense. The kids barely remembered me, and I ended up watching most of the festivities from the sidelines. But when we sat down for dinner, Michael pulled an extra chair from the garage. He piled his plate with my ham and asked, "Did you bring the cranberry stuffing too?" I did. He took a bite, closed his eyes. "Tastes like Dad." I swallowed the lump in my throat and looked around at the tablet, the people I'd once rocked to sleep and now barely knew. I didn't belong the way I used to. I knew that. Time had a way of carving gaps between us, years layered like frost on a window. But for that moment, we were together. Maybe not immediate family, but still family. And that was enough. After dinner, the kids disappeared to the basement to play with their new video games. I offered to help with the dishes, but Julie waved me off. She stacked plates with tight movements, her jaw clenched like she was chewing on something sour. Michael joined her at the sink, and for a while, There was only the sound of running water and clinking glass. I sat at the far end of the couch, nursing a mug of lukewarm cider, watching the fire flicker. The tree lights blinked in uneven patterns. They used to blink in sync. I noticed things like that. Michael's voice was low, but I caught snatches. She didn't call first. I know, but, well, she just shows up. You know how she is. I don't want to fight, Julie. It's Christmas. I looked down into my cider. The steam had vanished. Just like that, it was cold. They never meant to let me hear, but walls in modern houses are paper thin. They never used to talk like that about Minute that I knew of. Once upon a time, I was the one they called first, the one they wanted nearby. Before their world shifted, and I became the odd shape that didn't quite fit in their puzzle anymore. I stood quietly, made my way to the guest room they hadn't expected to use. It was still set up like a storage close-staff-wrapped gifts on the bed, unfolded laundry in a basket, a deflated air mattress leaning against the wall. I didn't mind. I pushed the gifts aside, laid out my coat, and sat on the edge of the bed. I didn't cry. Instead, I pulled the photo from my wallet. The one of my husband, Richard, with our son at 7 years old, both of them red-cheeked and grinning under a Christmas tree. That was the year Michael got the red wagon and insisted on sleeping in it. I remember that Christmas like it happened last week. I remember the smell of pine needles and sugar cookies, the sound of Bing Crosby from the record player, Richard lifting Michael up so he could put the star on the tree. Immediate family, I whispered. I lay back, the room colder than I expected. The floor vent rattled quietly, but no heat came through. I closed my eyes and tried to slow my thoughts. But sleep didn't come. The next morning, I rose before the sun, as I always did. Years of early nursing shifts had wired me that way. I tiptoed to the kitchen, trying not to wake anyone, and made coffee the old-fashioned Wayno pods, no fancy machines. Just grounds and patience. I found a small radio in the cabinet and turned it to the classical station. Soft violins filled the room as I reheated the ham for breakfast. When Julie came in, her hair still tousled from sleep, she blinked like she couldn't believe I was already up. I offered her a cup, and she accepted without a word. "Thanks," she said quietly. I nodded, gave her a moment. Then, "I know I surprised you. I didn't mean to upset things." She looked at me, mug halfway to her lips. "It's not that." I waited. "It's just Michael gets anxious when things don't go to plan. He's been different since Richard passed." I looked down at the counter. He was always close with his dad. He misses him more than he admits, especially around the holidays. I softened. "So do I." Julie looked tired. Tired in the way mothers of young children are always tired. But there was something else, guilt. Maybe. "I shouldn't have just shown up," I admitted. "No," she said, setting her mug down. "But I'm glad you did." We stood there in silence, two women on opposite ends of the same story. She didn't know the Michael I raised, the boy who cried when he thought Santa didn't get his letter. I didn't know the man she lived with now, who paced the house when work got stressful and said things like, "Mom's just difficult." But in that quiet moment, we understood each other a little. She turned back to the stairs. "We'll leave the gifts for later. Let the kids sleep in." "Good idea," I said. The day passed in slow waves. We played board games. Michael relaxed. The twins, once shy, warmed up to me after I showed them how to make marshmallow snowmen from scratch. I let them eat the candy, even though it wasn't time for snacks. Julie suggested I stay an extra day. Just one. That night, I slept on the air mattress, properly inflated. Michael had found the pump after dinner. And in the dark, while the rest of the house breathed in the deep rhythm of sleep, I whispered to Richard again. "They're trying," I said. "They're really trying." But everything changed 2 days later. It started with Michael's phone call. I was folding towels in the guest room when I heard him curse softly from the hallway. He ducked into his office, but didn't close the door all the way. I paused. "Wait, what do you mean he fell?" Pause. "Is he conscious? How bad is it?" Another pause. "I'll be there tonight." He hung up and saw me in the doorway. His face had gone pale. "That was Julie's father," he said. "He slipped on the ice getting the mail. Broke his hip. They're taking him into surgery." "I'm so sorry," I said truly. "He's in Vermont. Julie and I need to drive out there with the kids. We'll be gone a few days." "Of course," I said. "I'll pack and—" "No, Mom," he said, cutting me off. "Don't go. Stay here." I blinked. "Are you sure?" He looked down, then back up. "You'd be doing us a favor. Just keep an eye on the house. Maybe taking the mail. Feed the fish. I nodded, hiding the strange twist in my chest. So just like that, they were gone. For 3 days, the house was mine. I moved quietly, touching only what needed touching. I lit the tree each night and turned it off before bed. I cooked small meals. I listened to my music-hold records I found in a box in the basement. Richard would have loved it. The solitude reminded me of the early days of widowhood, when every creak in the house felt too loud, too sudden. But on the 4th morning, I woke to a sound I hadn't expected, the doorbell. I opened the front door to find a young woman, maybe in her 20s, standing on the porch with a bouquet of red roses. "Delivery for Ellen Thompson," she said, squinting at her clipboard. "I'm Ellen," I said, confused. She handed over the flowers. "Must be someone who really loves you." I looked at the card. "To Mom. Thanks for bringing Christmas back to us. Love, Michael." I held the flowers against my chest for a long time. That afternoon, I decided to do something I hadn't done in years. I took out the old recipe box, the one with the crooked tabs and yellowed cards, some in my handwriting, some in my mother's, even one in Richard's blocky print. And I began writing a cookbook. Not a fancy one, just a collection of everything I'd ever made for Christmas, every ham, every pie, every weird little tradition. With notes for the kids, with stories, with love. If they didn't always understand why I came, maybe someday they'd understand who I was. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough. On the 5th night, snow began to fall again. Thick, soft flakes that muffled the world in white. I turned off the TV and opened the curtains, letting the street light glow wash across the living room floor. Everything looked gentler under snow-softer edges, slower time. Like the world itself was exhaling. I sat by the window in silence, wrapped in a knitted throw, watching the snow cover the sidewalk. And for the first time in a long while, I felt something that surprised me. Peace. I hadn't come looking for peace. I'd come with casseroles and expectations. But what I found in the quiet hum of this borrowed house, in the rhythm of my son's life without me, was something smaller and maybe more valuable: stillness. I stood, stretched, and returned to the kitchen. On the counter sat the roses, now fully bloomed, open and crimson and unapologetically alive. I changed their water, then opened my notebook to where I'd left off. Page 9, snowball cookies. Your father used to sneak them before dinner. That's why I started hiding them in the bread box. I smiled to myself, writing slowly, letting the memories guide me like a hand on my back. The phone rang the next morning. I answered quickly, too quickly, maybe. "Mom." Michael's voice was scratchy, tired. "Hey." "Hi, honey. How's your father-in-law?" "Stable. He's going to need physical therapy, but he's lucky." "I'm glad to hear that." There was a pause. Then, "Listen, I just wanted to say thank you. For watching the house. For everything." "You're welcome." "And Mom." "Yes. I read your note. The one in the fridge about the cranberry sauce freezing weird in plastic." I laughed. "It separates if you don't stir it halfway." "Yeah, I figured that out the hard way." A longer pause. "Julie said we'll be heading back tomorrow night. Late. Take your time. The house is fine." He hesitated again. "You want to stay a few more days? After we're back?" It wasn't a grand invitation. Not an open-armed, "come live with us," or even a "we miss you." But it was something. A thread offered across the silence. "Yes," I said. "I'd like that." That night, I sat down in the guest room and opened the drawer next to the bed. Inside was a stack of old photos I hadn't noticed before Michael and Julie's wedding, the twins as infants, a camping trip I hadn't been invited to. They weren't hiding them. They just weren't showing them either. I held the one of the twins up to the light. Tiny, sleeping, swaddled in matching blankets. They were so little, and I'd missed so much. But that was the thing about time, it moved whether you were invited or not. The next morning, I cooked breakfast for myself and set 2 extra plates out anyway. Habit. Hope. Then the doorbell rang again. I wasn't expecting anyone. I opened it to find a boy, no more than 10, standing on the porch in a puffy green coat. His nose was red, and he looked nervous. "Hi," he said, shifting from foot to foot. Does Mr. or Mrs. Thompson live here?" I blinked. "They're away." "I'm his mother." "Oh." The boy relaxed a little. "I'm Danny. We live across the street." He pointed at a house wrapped in plastic snowmen and blinking blue lights. "Mom said I should come over and give you this," he added, holding out a small loaf of banana bread wrapped in cellophane. She said no one should be alone on Christmas week. I took it gently. That's very kind of her. Danny shrugged. She makes too much bread anyway. Tell her thank you. Okay. He turned to go, then paused. You want to come over later? We're building a Lego train set. You could help if you want. I almost said no. But something in his hopeful face, the kind of face that hadn't yet learned about unspoken invitations or emotional distance, made me stop. Yes, I said. I'd love to. By the time Michael and Julie returned that night, the house smelled like cinnamon and rising dough. I'd baked 3 loaves from the old recipe book, 2 for neighbors, 1 for us. Michael walked in with tired eyes and a grateful smile. Julie hugged me without hesitation. The twins ran to their rooms, exhausted from the long drive. I helped them unpack. We put the suitcases by the laundry machine, set out boots to dry. It was domestic, quiet, normal, and it felt good. After dinner, Michael sat beside me by the fire. You know, he said, I used to hate that cranberry stuffing. I raised an eyebrow. Excuse me. As a kid, I thought it was weird. Fruity bread? No thanks. But this year he trailed off. What? I don't know. It tasted like home. I touched his hand. It is. He squeezed back, then stood. Come on. The twins want you to read them something before bed. I followed him down the hallway. It was a small thing. A bedtime story. A shared sofa. A candle burning low. But it meant everything. Page 18, gingerbread house frosting. If you mess it up, just call it snow. The kids will believe you. They want to believe you. And maybe that's the point. The next morning, Julie handed me a small gift bag over coffee. I know it's late, she said. But Merry Christmas. I opened it slowly. Inside was a framed photo, one I hadn't seen before. Me, Michael, and the twins, all mid-laugh around the dinner table from a few nights ago. It was candid, blurry even, but real. I touched the glass, heart full. Julie said softly, We're glad you came. I looked up, eyes wet. So am I. That night, I lay in bed, listening to the wind rattle the windows. Snow would come again. Winter always did. But something inside had changed. They hadn't expected me. They hadn't wanted the disruption. But now they saw me. Not just as a burden from another generation, but as part of their story. Still necessary. Still loved. And I had remembered something too. I wasn't just the keeper of recipes or the deliverer of pie. I was a mother. A grandmother. A woman with a heart still beating, still capable of joy. I'd shown up uninvited. But sometimes, love needs you to. I couldn't sleep that night. Not from noise, or even discomfort, but from something else, something stirring in me. Like a clock that had started ticking again after years of silence. I slipped out of bed, pulled on a sweater, and padded down the hallway. The house was still, the kind of stillness you only get after midnight in winter. I passed the living room, the soft glow of the dying fire casting shadows on the ceiling. In the kitchen, I flipped on a light and poured a glass of water. And then, without quite knowing why, I reached for the notebook again. The one I'd been writing recipes and notes in. I sat at the table and opened to a fresh page. Page 29, Things You Should Know. When your father and I were first married, we had nothing but a folding table, 2 mugs, and a mattress on the floor. We made grilled cheese on a hot plate and danced to the radio. That was enough. If you're lucky, you'll realize what enough means before it's too late. I paused, staring at the ink, then kept writing. Page 30, Christmas Notes. You're going to mess things up. You'll forget someone's gift or say the wrong thing at dinner. You'll burn the rolls or spill the cider. That's okay. Christmas isn't perfect. It never was meant to be. It's about presence, not perfection. I wrote for nearly 2 hours. Thoughts that had sat heavy in my chest for years finally found their place on paper. Lessons I never got to tell Michael. Memories I feared would die with me. I didn't want to leave quietly anymore. The next morning, I cooked breakfast before anyone woke. The smell of bacon and coffee pulled the family out of their rooms like clockwork. The twins came first, rubbing their eyes, followed by Michael and Julie, both looking better rested than before. We ate together without saying much, just the clink of forks and the occasional soft chuckle when the boys told jokes with no punchlines. And when breakfast was done, Julie said something I'll never forget. We were thinking, she began, glancing at Michael. You should stay through New Year's. I blinked. Are you sure? Michael nodded. We mean it. We want you here. Want. Not tolerate. Not allow. Want. I smiled, slow and full. Then I'd love to. That afternoon, I helped Julie take down the stockings. She hesitated at the mantel, then pulled out a small one I hadn't seen before. White with silver thread. Unlabeled. "We bought an extra one," she said casually. "Wasn't sure who it was for. Maybe next year we'll stitch your name on it." Tears pricked the corners of my eyes. "I'd like that." I sat on the couch later with one of the boys. Lucas, while he showed me his new building set. He told me, seriously, that when he grows up, he wants to invent a robot that can clean up Legos so parents stop yelling. I laughed harder than I had in years. "That might be your $1,000,000 idea." "You really think so?" I nodded. "Absolutely. But I get first dibs on the prototype." He grinned, showing a missing front tooth. "Deal." That night, the house was louder than it had been before. Not chaotic, not crowded. Just full. Laughter in the background. Julie humming to herself while folding laundry. Michael reading the boys a bedtime story. I sat in the kitchen and added one last page to the notebook. Page 47. Final thought. If you ever wonder whether to call or show up, do it. Even if you're not invited. Even if they say they're fine. Show up anyway. Sometimes love looks like a suitcase on the porch and a pie in your hands. And sometimes, that's exactly what a family needs, even if they don't know it yet. The next day, I stepped outside into the snow to mail a letter. The cold bit through my gloves, but the air felt fresh and clean. The neighbors across the street waved. The boy, Danny, was building a snowman and called out, "Want to help again, Miss Ellen?" I waved back. "Maybe later." As I walked back up the porch steps, I looked at the wreath on the door, slightly lopsided, the way the twins had hung it. And I knew I belonged here. Maybe not in the same way I used to. Not as the center of the family, the orchestrator of everything, but as something just as important, a witness. A memory keeper. A link between what was and what could still be. Later that night, Michael found me flipping through the recipe notebook in the living room. "What is this?" he asked, curious. "I've been writing down everything I used to make for the holidays. Recipes. Notes. Some stories." He turned a few pages. "This is amazing." I shrugged. "I figured the boys might want to know someday. Or maybe you. If you ever decide to learn how to make a decent pie crust." He grinned. "I could use some help." "Well," I said, tapping the notebook, "start with page 6. And don't skip the part about freezing the butter." He sat beside me, notebook in hand. We talked until the fire died down. About Dad. About the Christmases before and the ones to come. About grief and love and the strange tenderness that lives between generations when no one's pretending anymore. By New Year's Eve, they'd cleared a drawer in the hallway for me. Julie added a new toothbrush to the holder in the bathroom. Michael asked if I'd help plan next year's Christmas menu. And the twins began calling the guest room Grandma's room. As I stood outside on the final night of the year, snow still falling gently, I thought back to that phone call. The one where Michael said they were keeping it small this year. Immediate family, he'd said. I smiled into the night. I guess sometimes it takes showing up, he announced. Arms full of casseroles to remind people that family doesn't shrink. Not really. It expands. If we let it. The first day of the new year arrived quietly. No fireworks, no champagne. Just the hum of the furnace, the clink of coffee cups, the low murmur of cartoons coming from the twins' bedroom. It was the kind of morning that might have gone unnoticed in the middle of a busy life. But I noticed it. I noticed everything now. I took my coffee to the dining room, the table still covered in a red tablecloth dotted with powdered sugar. Julie had left the holiday centerpiece up a little longer than usual. I appreciated that. Michael entered, yawning, in his slippers. "Happy New Year, Mom." "Happy New Year, sweetheart." He poured his own cup and sat beside me. For a long while, we just sat there, drinking quietly, like we'd done this every year for decades. The moment felt sacred in its ordinariness. "I read more of your notebook last night," he said finally. "Oh." I sipped calm. "You wrote about Dad. About how you met him at the Veterans Dance." I smiled. He was the only man who asked to see my library card before my phone number. Michael laughed. He always was weirdly formal. He was a gentleman. The last of his kind. He nodded, then hesitated. It made me miss him. Me too. Michael stared down at his mug, swirling what was left of the coffee. "I think I forgot how much I missed you too." That stopped me cold. "I didn't mean to push you away," he said softly. "I think I just got used to not needing help, or telling myself I didn't." I reached across the table and touched his hand. That's the thing about mothers. We show up whether we're needed or not. He gave a sheepish smile. I'm glad you did. I looked at him, really looked, and saw not the boy I had raised, or even the man who had grown distant, but something more vulnerable. The son who still wanted connection, even if he didn't always know how to ask for it. I'm not just a casserole delivery system, I said with mock sternness. No, he agreed. You're home. A few days later, I got a text message from someone I hadn't spoken to in years, Linda, my old neighbor from the street I left behind after Richard died. She'd heard from someone else that I'd spent the holidays with my son and that I hadn't returned yet. Are you okay? She asked. More than okay, I replied. I think I've been waiting for this version of my life for a long time. Julie started including me in small things at first. She'd ask me to fold laundry while she made dinner or go grocery shopping with her so she could use the carpool lane. But eventually, it grew into something deeper. We started baking together. One afternoon, she pulled out her mother's old bundt pan and said, "Teach me how to make that orange almond cake." I raised an eyebrow. The one with the rum glaze? The dangerous one, she said with a grin. As we worked, I told her stories. About the Christmas Eve when the oven broke. About the time Richard brought home a pre-cooked turkey and tried to pass it off as his own. About how Michael cried when he realized Santa used the same wrapping paper as I did. Julie laughed harder than I'd ever seen her laugh. And I saw her soften, too, not out of obligation, but out of something real, something blooming. I used to think you were judging me, she admitted while zesting the orange. I wasn't, I said. I was jealous. She stopped. You had them, I added gently. You were inside the circle. I was outside, watching. Julie nodded slowly. I never meant for it to feel that way. I know. We didn't need to say more. The cake turned out perfectly. That night, the twins licked their plates clean. When the kids went back to school and Michael returned to work, I found the house quieter again but not lonely. I filled my days with purpose. I joined Julie on morning walks. I volunteered to help at the twins' school library once a week. I organized the pantry alphabetically and taught Lucas how to make real macaroni and cheese. One afternoon, he looked at me while stirring the bechamel and said, "Grandma, can you stay forever?" My heart cracked open. I'll stay as long as they'll have me. One evening, I came home from the grocery store to find Michael waiting at the kitchen table. He looked nervous. I've been thinking, he said, about how hard it's been these past few years. After Dad died, how I buried myself in work, kept people out. I sat down across from him. I think I was scared to let you in because it meant admitting I still needed you, that I was overwhelmed, that being a parent isn't just exhausting, it's terrifying. I reached for his hand again. I wish you'd told me. I didn't know how. We sat in silence for a while. Then he slid a small envelope across the table. I opened it. Inside was a key and a note. In case you want to make this official. I looked up. The guest room, he said. We were thinking of turning it into your room. If you want. I didn't say anything right away. I just held the key like it was made of gold. I don't want to take over your life, I said quietly. You're not, he said. You're part of it. Weeks passed. Winter softened into early spring. The last patches of snow melted. The boys brought home muddy boots and homework and stories from school. I packed away the holiday decorations, but I left one item, UPA small ceramic angel that Richard gave me on our last Christmas together. You're the keeper, he'd said. I never knew what he meant until now. One afternoon in March, I was sitting on the porch when the mail arrived. In the stack was a padded envelope from a publishing company. I opened it, confused. Inside was a printed proof of the recipe book I'd been working on. Michael had submitted it quietly online, found a self-publisher, and paid for 10 copies. There was a note tucked inside. Your story matters, Mom. It always did. The world should hear it. Love. Michael. I held the book in my hands, me words, my recipes, my memories bound together like something worth keeping. And I wept. The following Christmas, the table was longer. Julie's parents joined us, having recovered well. The neighbors came by with wine and cheese. The twins sang carols off-key. And at the center of it all, my pie sat untouched for less than 5 minutes. Michael raised a toast. To the one who brought Christmas back into our lives. Everyone clinked their glasses. Even Julie stood beside me, arm around my shoulders. And I knew beyond any doubt that I was no longer just extra. I was home. Epilogue. I never returned to the little apartment I rented after Richard passed. I kept paying for it a few more months, out of habit, but eventually let it go. Home had changed locations. Again. Now, each year, when the first snow falls, I bake the cranberry stuffing. I bring out the old photos. I hang my stocking, yes, the one with my name stitched in silver thread. And we always set one extra place at the table. Because someone will come. Maybe not expected. Maybe not immediate. But someone will bring their whole self, like I did. And we will make room. Because that's what family does. We expand.